Silicon Valley, we live and breathe technology, but we don't think about how what we invent affects lives of people in every day. I'm very honored to introduce here Joseph Danowsky, who will have very key takeaways from Joseph, who is legally blind and has been influenced his entire life by the evolution of accessible technology. A little bit about Joseph. He's a managing director and private client advisor at the US Trust. Prior to US Trust, he was a managing director and head of strategic solutions group for Barclays Wealth America. He has worked for more than 2 decades at Bear Stearns & Company, where as a senior managing director, he helped to establish the Advisory Services Wealth Management Group. He began his Bear Stearns career in the legal department, where he rose to managing director. Joe has been active in the advancement of education and technology for individuals with visual impairments through his 18 years of service on the board of directors of Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic. Joe earned his JD from Harvard Law School and his BA in economics from UPenn. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. So you've probably seen me walking around this wonderful conference over the last day and a half, and some of you may have seen me and have not realized that I'm legally blind. And so what does legally blind mean? So a person who is legally blind, if you can imagine that you are not able to read a printed page. Imagine you can't read your iPhone or a computer screen. Imagine you cannot drive a car or read street signs. Imagine it's difficult to recognize faces. But in my case, I have enough vision to walk around without a cane. I have enough vision to see colors and shapes. That's the way I see, that's the way that I have been, my vision has been throughout my life. And so there are a lot of people in this world who have visual disabilities. And you know, the World Health Organization, I saw figures that estimate there are 280 million people in the world who have serious visual impairments, of which about 40 million are completely blind. And in the United States, there are millions of people who have visual impairments where they're unable to read printed material. So in my work, as Karpagam said, I started out as a lawyer in my career. I graduated from college, graduated from law school, and I worked in various Wall Street firms. And in that work, I traveled throughout the United States and through Europe, delivering financial solutions to clients. And these solutions often meant me dealing with concentrated stockholders, meeting with venture funds, private equity funds, and executives of companies, and coming up with solutions that typically involved financial and legal knowledge to help solve a particular problem. Every day that I've worked, even though there are certain challenges, as you can imagine, when you're visually impaired, traveling through an airport, reading a schedule, keeping track of a calendar, knowing where you're going in a strange city are all challenges. But no matter those challenges, I've always felt very grateful to have had the opportunity to be working, because I knew that so many blind and visually impaired people were unable to find jobs. And there's numbers reported by Cornell's Institute on Education and Disability Institute that says about 60% of the working aged, legally blind individuals in America are not working. And this is the same 60% approximate figure which the National Federation for the Blind says is the number of unemployed. So if you can imagine, that's quite a large number. And if I were to say to any of you in the room, well, let's pick a group by gender, by race, by ethnicity, and if I were to tell you that 60% of the working age persons of that group were not working, you would be appalled by that. So I want to talk about the evolution of some of this technology, how it's going to help people throughout the world to live better lives, and especially how it might get people into the workforce. So when I started college and law school, when I was in college and law school, The only way for me to do my work was either have readers who read for me, scheduling students, many students several times a week, or to have recorded text from Recording for the Blind that were recorded on cassette tapes. If you can imagine trying to schedule all those readers to sit with me and read, if you can imagine using cassette tapes to study where there's no way to really index where you are on the tapes or get to always the exact page or the exact chapter, and then imagine how many tapes that takes. You know, when I finished a semester at college or law school, I might have 5 shopping bags of tapes to deal with and return. That's how many tapes there were. So when I remember when I was back in law school in 1982, Harvard Law School bought one of the first Kurzweil reading machines. And this, to me, was as amazing as hearing of a man landing on the moon. Because to take a printed page in 1982 and to turn it into spoken word was just an amazing thing. And it was just amazing that Ray Kurzweil devoted himself to develop this incredible machine at a time when I knew no one who owned a personal computer. I never saw a scanner. These were not common devices. So to see this machine was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, the machine was about as big as a suitcase. It was confined to the law school library. And if you can imagine the hundreds of pages a law student needs to read, it was quite difficult to think about turning pages on that machine. It just was not a practical way to get my work done. So time went on. I graduated from law school, and maybe about 10, 12 years later, in 1995, I felt that computers were advanced enough in the way the screen reader sounded, the way a scanner could handle a page, for me to try to use a computer, a talking computer with a screen reader. And at that time, I used the OS2 system, which probably none of you remember, but basically OS2 was an IBM system that also allowed you to run DOS programs. And so running a DOS program without a graphical interface, being able to just deal with the command line or just the typing text of a screen made it easy for a blind person to use that type of computer system. But as you know, computer technology advanced in many, many major steps. And one of them was the graphical user interface, which became dominant. So it was always this case of having to chase this technology. The graphical user interface developed, you have to figure ways for a screen reader to navigate that. Of course, as programs got prettier in their design, they got more complicated for people with visual disabilities to deal with. So as this technology changed, there became some major points of technological change that really, in some ways, made things worse, and as I will explain later, made things better. One of the major changes in the 90s was the introduction of the BlackBerry, which revolutionized the ways that people would communicate. Everybody used a BlackBerry for email, they used a BlackBerry to set their schedules, and it was an instant messaging way of dealing with information. Everyone seemed to be using it except me. So when I had to do my work, I had to call in the office, find out about my schedules, see who sent me an email, and try to compete with a world that was moving 10 times faster than it did before. As I said, that device was an incredible device, but because it had no screen reader for the BlackBerry, I could not use it. I could not participate in that technological revolution. And I was sort of set back in terms of my ability to do all the things I wanted to be able to do as everyone else. So as I was very interested in education and technology for people with disabilities and thinking that this is really the way to get visually impaired people into the workforce, focusing on education, focusing on technology, I became involved on the board of directors of Recording for the Blind, and I served on the board for 18 years. And what we did was we recorded textbooks with the help of 4,000 volunteers throughout the United States and delivered those textbooks to about 25,000 visually impaired college students. And when I started out, as I said, we used cassette tapes. So what we tried to do on Recording for the Blind and advanced the technology to be able to make a better way of distributing this material. So the first thing we started with was trying to look into electronic books that were distributed on 5-inch floppy disks. The other was to start working towards using a CD versus tapes, where you could put one book on one CD as opposed to having 20 tapes representing one book. But more importantly, we worked on a methodology for creating navigation on the CD, how to get to the exact page, how to get to the exact chapter or heading. And we worked with this group called the DAISY Consortium to figure out the methodology for doing that. And we got to the point in the late 90s where we began to put everything on these disks, and it was a major step forward. But the greatest inflection point technologically for me occurred in 2007 and 2008. Because at that time, a Canadian company named Humanware developed this device called the Victor Reader Stream. And this was a device that instead of using CDs to hold books, used an SD card. And the device fit in the palm of your hand. And the beauty of it was that it incorporated this DAISY standard for indexing books. So you could go to the exact page, you could go to the chapter headings, you could make notes, you could highlight things in those books. The device would hold 100 books, 100, maybe 200 books. And the beauty of this was the immediacy of receiving the materials. For instance, to be able to get a book from Audible, a trade book from Audible on the day that the book comes out, and be able to read it the way and in the time frame that everybody else who's talking about that book is reading it. The other thing that happened in that time frame of 2007 and 2008 was Nokia came out with its amazing smartphone, the N95. And today, you look at the N95, a button phone, it doesn't seem that sophisticated, but it was quite a very sophisticated device. And a company called Nuance Technology created software to enable the phone to talk and to read the screen. And so at that point, I was able to keep a calendar. I was able to receive and send emails. I was able to send text messages. And I was able to navigate on a street in an unknown place with the navigation software. But as great as the N95 was as a device, the problem was technology was moving ahead. And phones were getting more powerful, they were getting smarter. But the problem was the technology was moving away from me again, because the technology was moving into glass screens on Galaxies and iPhones. And so who, I feared, would make a phone that had buttons on it in a market where there was really no demand for it? So I worried about that, and I just stuck with the N95 for years. Finally, in 2013, I decided to try the iPhone 5. And when I first got it, this piece of glass, and I couldn't use it. I couldn't make a phone call, couldn't answer the phone. So I went into the Apple store, had a few lessons. I listened to some podcasts from the Hadley School for the Blind that explained how to use the phone. And suddenly it was like magic. It was like being able to do everything. It was easy to have a phone list and contact list. It was easy to send an email. I could use it to read documents. I could use it for navigation. And I could integrate with my workplace to get emails. In the way the N95 was like turning a flashlight on in a dark auditorium, the iPhone was like turning all the lights on. It was just an amazing thing. But in 2013, when I first started using the iPhone, coincidentally, I was deciding to look into my next career move. And I used the phone to call my contacts, and I used the phone to send emails, to send articles to people so that I can get in front of them, to read newspapers, to get lead ideas, to look at the internet and job sites like Indeed. And I was doing all of this with a headset on and talking to people and working with the phone. And it occurred to me that this is a job, that this phone could create a job for a person who was blind. Because A person holding this phone and putting a headset on could be working as a recruiter, reading resumes, sending emails, calling people. This person could be associated with a call center, answering orders and fulfilling orders. A person who's blind could be tutoring someone and looking at lesson plans through the use of the phone, hearing the lesson plans and talking to the student over the phone. It was just such a remarkable thing to think that somebody who was blind could suddenly have this tool that makes the whole world accessible and makes it possible to do something and to be part of the workforce and to be doing something which is one of the most important things that gives people a great part of the meaning in their lives. The most important thing, though, is the most important thing about the iPhone is, for the first time, I wasn't playing technological catch-up. I wasn't chasing the technology. The phone comes talking right out of the box. The software VoiceOver, which is different from Siri, VoiceOver, the screen reader, is built into the phone. It comes out of the box talking. You have to turn it off if you don't want to use VoiceOver. And the idea that all the programs work, that I can read newspapers, I can go on the internet. Everything I need to do, it just works. And I remember a couple weeks ago I had called Apple because I had a problem with the screen reader. And I was talking to the tech. And he said, yes, that's a problem. I demonstrated the problem. He said, yes, that's a problem. And he said, yep, it's not right. We're going to make it right. And when the next version of the software came out, the problems were corrected. And it's this kind of commitment to make this technology accessible in the same way it's accessible to a sighted person that is going to make all the difference. As I'm talking here today, I don't want this to be about me, because it's not really about me. The purpose of my talk today is really about you. And what I mean by that, I want this to be a call to action to the people at this conference, the people in this audience who form companies, who are entrepreneurs, who create this technology, to keep in mind what kind of impact this can have on the lives of the visually impaired and people with other disabilities. Because I believe that access to this technology is as important as access to education or the right to work. And as all these amazing technologies that you're involved in and are developing start unfolding, it is just such an exciting thing to believe that I can be part of it, and that the things that you can do can just change people's lives in such radical ways. Thank you.